Good evening, RENEWS English section is on air. I'm Sona Tumanyan. We continue to cut through the noise and bring you news from Armenia and around the world with balanced reporting, expert analysis and diverse perspectives. Join us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and X. Get your portion of information from our official website, recipient.media. The U.S. orders the evacuation of non-essential embassy staff and their families from Baghdad and growing security threats. According to U.S. officials, the decision comes as tensions spike across the region. CBS News reports that Israel may be preparing a military operation against Iran, a move that could trigger Iranian relation, possibly targeting American interests in Iraq.
We're hearing reports that U.S. personnel are being moved out of the region within striking distance.
Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But they are being, we've given notice to move out, and we'll see what happens.
Is there anything that can be done to dial the temperature down in the region?
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple.
Rising tensions with Iran are pulling global powers back into a familiar standoff. President Trump is retreating to Camp David for high-level talks on Tehran's nuclear program, while Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu convenes his security cabinet. The IAEA has, for the first time in 20 years, declared Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations, a move that could trigger renewed UN sanctions. In response, Iran has released alleged intel or Israel's secret nuclear activities, accusing the IAEA chief of bias.
The Trump administration, returning to its maximum pressure policy, is trying to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. A meeting at Camp David, which will include key members of Trump's foreign policy team, is aimed at developing a strategy that incorporates both diplomatic negotiations and, if necessary, military options. President Trump has repeatedly stated that he will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. However, he has also stressed the priority of a diplomatic path, noting that successful negotiations could save many lives. Nevertheless, Trump's position contains certain contradictions. On one hand, he is pressuring Iran with economic sanctions and military threats. On the other, he is pursuing negotiations. Mediated by Oman and Italy, the sixth round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran is scheduled to take place in Muscat on Sunday, June 15th. Iran, in turn, demands the easing of sanctions and the recognition of its right to enrich uranium for civilian purposes. The success of these negotiations depends on whether the parties can reach an agreement on the limits of uranium enrichment and Iran's nuclear infrastructure. In contrast to Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu is categorically opposed to the preservation of Iran's nuclear program in any form. He insists that Iran's nuclear infrastructure must be completely dismantled and that Tehran must be denied the ability to enrich uranium. Israel, having conducted operations against Iran in recent years, believes that Iran is currently in a militarily weakened state, which creates a unique opportunity to strike its nuclear facilities. An upcoming meeting of Israel's Security Council, which will include not only the defense minister, but also representatives of far-right parties, indicates Netanyahu's intention to consolidate domestic support for possible action against Iran. According to Israeli media, the military planning phase, including the transfer of air assets and ammunition, is nearing completion. A recent 40-minute phone call between Trump and Netanyahu underscores their close cooperation, but also certain disagreements. Trump urged Netanyahu to refrain from military actions that could disrupt the negotiations. Meanwhile, Netanyahu insisted that a credible military threat against Iran must always be maintained. Trump, however, has not specified whether the U.S. would support a unilateral Israeli strike if the negotiations fail. These disagreements are deepened by the two leaders' different approaches. Trump, seeking to avoid a new war in the Middle East, gives priority to diplomacy. In contrast, Netanyahu, seeing Iran's weakened state as a strategic opportunity, is adopting a more aggressive approach. Israel's military plans, which include airstrikes and possibly commando operations, would require both military and diplomatic support from the U.S. A Reuters forecast, based on information about Israeli military preparations and the Trump-Netanyahu talks, suggests an Israeli strike on Iran could happen within days. Such a strike by Israel could have serious consequences. Iran has promised to respond harshly to any Israeli attack, which could lead to a regional war, including the activation of Iran's allied militant groups. At the same time, an Israeli strike could push Iran to develop a nuclear weapon more quickly or to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. A regional escalation could also disrupt oil supplies, leading to an energy crisis.
Tensions in the Middle East are nearing a critical point. Israel is reportedly preparing for potential military action against Iran, prompting serious concern in Washington. According to CBS News, U.S. officials believe Iran could retaliate by targeting American assets in neighboring Iraq and have advised some U.S. citizens to leave the region. We are monitoring closely, we are deeply concerned, and we believe the situation is more serious than ever before, a senior diplomat in the region told the Washington Post. The New York Times, citing a top Iranian official, reports that Tehran has finalized plans to respond to any Israeli strike with hundreds of ballistic missiles. The threat of full-scale confrontation is once again looming large in the Middle East.
The IAEA has announced that Iran has violated its nuclear non-proliferation obligations, drawing sharp reactions from both Tehran and Jerusalem. Iran condemned the report as political pressure and threatened to expand its nuclear program. Israel, viewing the program as an existential threat, is considered by some U.S. analysts as likely to strike Iran's nuclear facilities in the coming days, though experts suggest such strikes would be small and precise. A potential Israeli strike could have serious regional consequences. Iran has warned it would retaliate against U.S. military bases in its reach. The strategic ties between Israel and Azerbaijan could draw Azerbaijan into any conflict, a situation Iran has stated is unacceptable if it leads to border changes in the South Caucasus. The escalating tensions are making the situation in the Middle East explosive, with a high risk of military conflict if diplomacy fails. In response to what it calls growing regional threats, Iran has launched large-scale military exercises. The Iranian Mehr news agency reported that the drills began on the special order of the Chief of the General Staff, Mohammad Bagheri. Bagheri stated the purpose is to increase Iran's defensive power, its level of operational readiness, and its deterrence capabilities. According to Mehr, Iran has altered its 2025 military exercise plan to address the heightened regional threats.
A planet in turmoil, from nuclear tensions to aviation tragedy. In India, an Air India Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner bound for London has crashed moments after takeoff from Ahmedabad Airport. The aircraft went down in a residential area, prompting a large emergency response. Among the victims, 169 Indians, 53 Britons, 7 Portuguese nationals, and 1 Canadian, including 11 children. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the disaster deeply shocking and pledged full support for recovery efforts, and investigation is underway. Protests against ICE turned confusional in multiple U.S. cities Wednesday. In Seattle, 8 protesters were arrested after a mostly peaceful march escalated when a dumpster was set on fire and officials were targeted with bottles, rocks, and fireworks, though no injuries were reported. Meanwhile, in Tucson, Arizona, more than 100 protesters gathered, with at least 3 detained after some vandalism, including broken windows and graffiti. One protester told local media they were there to protect their community. As the war in Ukraine rages on, signs of both escalation and fragile diplomacy emerge. In a rare moment of coordination, Russia and Ukraine have carried out a prisoner exchange, even as fighting intensifies across key fronts. From the deadly shelling in Kharkov to a high-stakes summit in Odessa, the past few days have underscored the region's deepening instability and the difficult path ahead toward peace. The war remains at the center of global concern, where military conflict, humanitarian crisis, and international diplomacy collide.
Russian forces are persistently advancing toward the left bank of the Dnipro, apparently with the prospect of splitting it into 2. At the same time, they are continuing their advance in the Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. In the past day, the center group of Russian forces captured the settlements of Petrovska and Alexievka in Donbass. On the night of June 11th and 12th, Russian forces launched massive strikes on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, mainly using attack drones. Ukrainian media publishing news under the headline "Kharkiv under fire" report that as a result of the attack, residential buildings, dozens of cars, and businesses were burned. As a result of the shelling, 14 people were injured, 4 of whom are children. The Russian side, in turn, is reporting on missile attacks from the Ukrainian side, noting that overnight 52 Ukrainian drones were shot down in Russian airspace, 3 of them in the Moscow region. Meanwhile, the warring parties have conducted a prisoner of war exchange. The number of exchanged soldiers has not been specified by either side. The Russian servicemen are already in Belarus, from where they will be transferred to Russia for treatment and rehabilitation. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius arrived in Kyiv today on an unannounced visit to personally assess the situation and discuss additional military aid with the Ukrainian government. His visit follows the statement by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that German arms supplies to Ukraine will henceforth be secret, with the aim of keeping Russia in a state of strategic ambiguity. Moreover, Merz also promised to supply Kyiv with long-range Taurus missiles, something former Chancellor Olaf Scholz had avoided. These developments indicate a deepening of Germany's military support, despite internal political disagreements, particularly the calls from Pistorius's fellow Social Democrats to prioritize diplomacy. Issues of peace and regional stability were discussed at a summit in Odessa, attended by southwestern countries. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russia's military plans are directed at Odessa, as well as the borders of Moldova and Romania.
We need protection now, but first and foremost, long-term guarantees that this aggression will not be repeated.
Romanian President Nicolae Dan accused Russia of undermining peace efforts.
The only language Russia understands is the language of force. I call for supporting Ukraine to negotiate from a position of strength.
Moldovan President Maia Sandu warned of Russia's attempts to interfere in her country's parliamentary elections scheduled for this autumn by means of hybrid warfare. Incidentally, hours before the summit, Odessa was subjected to a Russian missile attack.
Tensions rise in the eastern Mediterranean as Turkey grows increasingly wary of India's deepening ties with Greece, according to a report by Z News India. Turkish media outlets have voiced concern that India may soon strengthen both defense and economic relations with Greece. Greek press recently reported that India is exploring major investments in the country, including ports, tourism, and defense sectors. Sources say Ankara is particularly alarmed by the possibility of Indian-backed defense projects on Greek soil. Z News also notes India's expanding strategic partnerships with Cyprus and Armenia, two countries with historically strained ties to Turkey. Armenia, described in the report as a friendly nation, is already receiving advanced Indian-made weapons, which proved effective during India's military standoffs with Pakistan. This evoking triangle of partnerships is raising red flags in Ankara as New Delhi asserts its influence in the region. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has extended congratulations to Russian President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin on the occasion of Russia Day. In his message to Putin, Pashinyan highlighted the importance of continued cooperation between Armenia and Russia. Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan praised his country's delegation for its active participation at the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice, France. From mountains to oceans, from Armenia to Argentina, glad to participate in UNCO3 as part of the Armenian president's delegation. UNOC3 was an important engagement as, with the trust and support of international partners, put best efforts for holding a very successful and result-oriented COP17, Ararat Mirzoyan wrote. During the event, Mirzoyan and Armenian President Vahagan Khachaturian also held a meeting with Argentine President Javier Milei. Violence erupted for a third night in Northern Ireland, with police attacked by fireworks, bottles and bricks. The worst unrest hit Ballymena while masked youth in Lame set fire to the leisure centre that had been sheltering families affected by earlier clashes. The disorder began Monday following a peaceful protest over an alleged sexual assault in Ballymena, County Antrim. A designer toy has just fetched a jaw-dropping price in China, setting a new global record. A human-sized Labubu doll sold this week for 1.8 million yuan, or roughly $150,000 at a high-profile auction in Beijing. The 131-centimeter figure that's over 4 feet tall was the highlight of Yangon International Auction's latest event. The quick monster character created by Hong Kong artist Casey Lan has gained a cult following in recent years, boosted by celebrity endorsement and limited edition drops. Labubu toys, typically sold for about $51 or $7 through Chinese toy giant Pop Mart, have become a sensation among collectors. But this latest sale takes the brand into new territory, officially making it the most expensive toy of its kind ever sold. And finally, tonight, a moment of hope amid heartbreak. 6-month-old Sivar Ashur, frail but resilient, was among a group of Palestinian children evacuated from Gaza to Jordan this week. At just 3 kilograms, she weighs half what she should, but she's now out of harm's way. Her mother, Nadia, says the first thing she noticed after crossing the border was the quiet. "I feel like there is a truce," she told us. "Tonight we slept without raw cats." Sivar's journey wasn't just medical, it was deeply emotional. Her father, Saleh, who is blind, traveled with her, saying, "The first and last goal of this trip is Sivar. She's my daughter, my flesh and blood. I want her safe. I want her healed." In a region gripped by crisis tonight, for one family at least, there is peace. For more updates, follow us on YouTube, Telegram, Instagram, X, Facebook. Daily news and full coverage are available on our official website. This segment was presented by Sona Tumanyan. Good night.